Good morning again. My name is Reverend Maurice Guerette, and the title of my talk is You Are More Than This. You are more than this. And based on the theme of will and understanding. Now I invite you to relax. Take a deep breath if that's comfortable for you and just let it out slowly. Then with the center of attention at the crown of the head, affirm to yourself, the Christ of God is quickened in me. The Christ of God is quickened in me. Moving moving down to the forehead, to acknowledge that you are aware of conscious of the spiritual awakening, affirm within your thoughts. I am aware that the Christ of God is quickened in me. I am aware that the Christ of God is quickened in me. Now move down to the solar plex region, the emotional center. Feel the emotion of gratitude in response to this Christ quickening. And affirm, I am grateful that the Christ of God is quickened in me. Now gently and easily, let the focus or spotlight of your attention to travel to each physical centers you have studied. Faith, strength, wisdom, order, love, power, imagination. Now let your attention rest at the forehead and spiritually quicken the faculties of understanding and will. By affirming the light of understanding enables me to see clearly and to take right action. The light of understanding enables me to see clearly and to take right action. And as we close out the month on the topic of will, the 12 powers of will, let us say together the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray, the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. When I studied the 12 powers, as Don is doing now, part of that, one of our metaphysical teacher was Dr. Ed Rabel. And for those of you that have been in Unity for a while, he was a fantastic metaphysician. He was a real gem of a teacher. He was very outspoken.
very quick to respond, but he was a great teacher. And one of the things that he told us about the 12 powers that Charles Fillmore initiated, which actually differentiates unity from any other New Thought religion, is the 12 powers. But one of the things that he told us is that the 12 powers work better in tandem. 2 powers work much better than 1 power in certain situations. And will and understanding are so close together that when Lynette told me that this power today was will, I'd like to tie it in with understanding as well, because they are so closely related. And one of the great authors, unity authors, is Charles Rolfe. He was a great metaphysician and a great teacher. And he talks about understanding, which is represented by Thomas, and will, which is represented by Matthew. And Proverb tells us that with all thy getting, get understanding. So it's giving us that direction. How do we get understanding? And the will is the man, wrote 17th century mystic John Wilson. So the will is the man, or woman in this case, generically speaking. So what is this understanding? The getting of which is more to be desired when rubies or precious gems? Why is the will the person, the individual? Go. We study the mind power faculties of understanding and will together, for we find they are so closely related. They both from here. The will is the executive department. It carries out or executes what you understand to be right and good. Let me say that again. The will is the executive department. It carries out or executes what you understand to be right and good. Or at any rate, what you understand to be your best course of action. You just know it right here because you understand the situation. You understand the process. Or you understand the principles. Understanding is represented. The reason for taking them together is that they work as a team. The will carries out what we understand or accept as true. And Charles Fillmore, second wife, Cora Fillmore, wrote this, and we don't always hear about her. These powers are working together, have the ability to perceive in the invisible realm of thought, understanding, and to direct and bring the inner light from the unmanifest to the manifest world, which is our will. In short, there are your faculties of mind that connect the inner world of thought to the outer world of manifestation. Simple principles. You do not, you do, you act, you execute what you predominantly thought or thoughts are. So as you think, so you are. So you become. To be specific, if your thoughts are predominantly materialistic, worshiping money and power, then your actions are directed toward cultivating influential friends, reading financial statements, is studying ways of making more money, or increasing your investments. So that's where your thought is directed. Or to put it in an exaggerated form, someone who thinks about golf all the time doesn't will to spend his leisure time playing tennis, does he? He thinks about golf all the time, or whatever the case may be. He wills or acts out of his golf thoughts. He's always trying to perfect his game internally. So now there are two kinds of understanding: intellectual understanding and spiritual understanding. Intellectual understanding is generated from the outside yourself through your five senses. Spiritual understanding wells up from within you through intuition and inspiration. So, it's a very good explanation of what the difference between understanding and will, because they're so closely together. So, at every moment of every day, we get to choose whether we want to come from condition-based thinking, our will, or source-based living, God's will. Condition-based thinking is from the outer. Our will, we want to make it happen. Source-based living, or based living, inner-directed, and depend how to look at life. And depending on how we look at life, through the filters of condition or unfiltered, straight through source, God's source. Then we have our experience, our God experience, our moment. So where do you go in your mind when bad things happen? Where do you go? Do we get caught up in the drama or the trauma of the condition and try to will that to be controlled? I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to get it right. Or do we go to base source thinking? There's a famous saying, what would Jesus do? Well, in our case, it's what would God have me do? Where is God in this situation? Is when you understand that, you realize that, you go to that source and the answers will come. And you don't try to force it. Or are you really truly awake to your source-based living? Are you in touch with God? Do you know where the source or universal help is? Do you know where God lives? One little boy in Sunday school, when the teacher asked that question, where does God live? He raised his hand and said, I know. And the teacher says, well, where does God live? And the little boy replied, says, he lives in my bathroom. And the teacher was kind of perplexed about that. And he says, why do you say he lives in your bathroom? He says, because every morning my father goes to bed and knocks on the door and he says, good Lord, are you still in there? Those are the days when you have only one bathroom. Good Lord, are you still in there? Actually, we know that God, or Lord, lives in you. That God is part of you all the time. There's something in you greater and grander than you could ever imagine or possibly realize. That spark of God is within you. And an evolutionary urge for greater expression that something has been planted in you from the beginning. You are here for a purpose, for a reason. And will you tap into that source? Today we'll look at another step into source-based living as we explore how much more we are. You are more than this persona. So when Jesus asked his disciples, who do men say that I am? Some say he is the carpenter's son. Some say he was Moses. Some said he was Elijah. Coming back into expression. Peter, unconfused by the person, said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus gave his approval of that statement by saying, blessed art thou, Simon Peter, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And right after that, Peter tried to walk on water by himself. And what happened? He sunk. He started out walking on water when he was focusing on Jesus, the source. And when he did that, he could walk on water. But when his will took over and said, what am I doing? I can't be doing this. That's when he sunk. Because he disconnected from source. Ernest Holmes, founder of religious science, says, we are born of eternal day, and the spiritual sun shall never set upon the glory of the soul. For it is the coming forth of God into self-expression. We are that self-expression, that God self. I want to personalize this statement and say, I am born of eternal day, and the spiritual sun shall never set upon the glory of my soul. For I am the coming forth of God into self-expression. My will be done. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done. We were given that promise from the beginning. You are God in expression. So God's will is being done through you, each one of us. I am the coming forth of God into self-expression. Say that with me. I am the coming forth of God into self-expression. You are that expression. So this is your spiritual truth. But my guess is that this is not the concept that gets the majority of our attention, even if we say we believe that truth. I don't think I would be wrong speculating that in general, we spend 95% of our time thinking about the tangible, physical aspects of ourselves and trying to manipulate, control, coerce, or cajole this tangible, physical world into being something we want, rather than having the perspective that we are the coming forth of God in self-expression. We spend most of our time thinking about, what am I going to make for dinner? Where am I going to go for the holiday weekend? We see Lynette and the girls swimming in the ocean. They're doing their thing. Wonderful. But when we do that, we keep thinking about what tomorrow will bring. And this is so putting the cart before the horse. And this morning we're going to try and put the horse before the cart. And this morning I was sitting out in my garden reviewing my talk for today, and this guy walks by with 2 horses, pulling 2 horses down the street. And my wife says, well, where are you going? He says, I'm taking them to the spa to get a bath. So we want to put the horse before the cart. In order to do that, we have to spend a little time discovering what we aren't, so that we can discover what we are. Who do you identify with? Who are you anyway? Everything that I am is in my wallet, right? Most of you have your wallet or your purse, whatever. And my last name indicates Guerette, which is French. Indicates I'm French Canadian. I was born in Maine. So that tells me that I am French in nationality. And then you have your driver's license, which you have to show to identify who you really are. You can tell somebody, but unless they see this, they don't believe you. And then, in my case, I'm a minister, so I have my certificate from Unity School stating that I am an ordained community minister. Okay? And then, what you have to consider is whether you are a success or a failure. And how do you do that? How much money do you have? How much money do you have? And that tells you that you're a success. Well, I tried, but my wife is, one of the things that we learned from our teachers way back in ministerial school is that always carry around money to identify that you are a rich individual of God. So I carry a spare $100 bill all the time, right? And that proves that you're prosperous. You're a success because you have money. Whether you spend it or not, it's always it's a great principle to think by. Because then you can say, I'm a rich child of God. Hey, I got a $100 bill. I used to carry $1 million bill just to really play it up big. And I could never cash that one for some reason. So I decided I shouldn't be able to carry that. So, but then the other one is your relationships. Who you are is what kind of relationship are you in? Well, my wife and I just celebrated 48 years of marriage. So that says that I'm married.
Yeah.
So does that identify who I am? That's your personal history. This may sound radical ideas perhaps, but consider the possibility of removing your personal history from your consciousness and simply use completely in the present moment, to be in the present moment, because that's not who you are. That's not who you are. That's who you think you are, because that's how you've evolved into this life. First thing that might pop into your mind is this, that this is impossible. You can't lose that identity. I do have a memory, so far, at this age. I do forget a few things, which I'm sure all of you do as well. And it would be ridiculous for me to pretend that I am not the product of my past. That's what we try to achieve. We work on all our lives to be something or somebody. Spirit knows no past and is not affected by the belief in any. The past is swallowed up in the victory of a perfect present, which is filled with love and protection. That's what it is. It's all about today. Who you are today. And how you make up your mind to be who you are. Because you're more than that. You're more than your personality. And in Course in Miracles it says to be born again is to let the past go. Now I'm not suggesting that we let our past is necessarily an easy thing to eliminate our past. You can't do that. In fact, it may take some concerted attention on your part to do that. But the reality is that when we are hanging on to the past, to all our feelings and perhaps unworthiness, inadequacies, failings, is as if we're trying to climb a ladder with cement blocks on our belt. How many of you ever saw the movie Mission, The Mission, with Robert De Niro? It was a fantastic movie about a man, a priest, a Jesuit priest, who had to go up on the mountain to try and convert the Indians. Well, he had to take all his personal belongings with him in a big bag, but he had to climb a cliff. And the more he climbed the cliff, the harder it got for him to carry this big bag. And little by little, he would discard objects out of that bag to make his climb a little easier. But sometimes that's what we face in life, don't we? That it gets tougher and tougher, like we have cement shoes, we can't get there. So it's always harder. So the first thing to discover is that you are not your past. You are more than this. I am one with God, now and forever. I am that I am in this very moment. So you are not your name. That is not your identity. Now remember famous Amos? Whatever happened to him, right? Let me read you his story. Famous Amos cookies he developed. Anyone familiar with the story? He was the founder of the famous Amos cookies, and he became a success beyond belief with his cookies. His company became large and very successful. Then they had a leveraged buyout, and he found himself out of the company and legally forbidden to use his name in any new product he might develop. His name now legally belonged to the cookies, but not to him. He went into a depressed state of mind. He did, because he had lost all identity of himself. So what happened to Amos at that point? He had an identity crisis. Dark night of the soul, which started him on his spiritual quest to discover who he really was. We know that he has grown and traveled down the spiritual road because he started his next company and called it No Name Cookie Company. Is that what you're laughing at? No? Is that right? No Name Cookie Company. Now, in my prior profession as a hairdresser, I was known as Mr. Maurice. And my wife was known as Mrs. Maurice. But that's just the first name. It wasn't my last name. But that was my professional name. And that's what she was called as well. Now my daughter, sometimes people change their names to be more spiritual and be more aware of who they really are. Now my daughter, just for an example, my daughter is a psychic, and she's very good, and she's in touch with spiritual aspects of the world, and she's a spiritual teacher and spiritual counselor. And she changed her name to Kalea because she went to Hawaii and got trained by the grandmothers, and they gave her that name, Kalea, because it means one who speaks to angels. One who speaks to angels. So she uses that name as well as her real name, which is Helen. But that's who she becomes spiritually. And people sometimes change their name to present themselves as a spiritual being with a spiritual name. But your name is not who you are. Your name is just your identity at that particular moment. But that's not who you are. You are not your body. Your body is something you possess, like these words of C.S. Lewis. You don't have a soul. You are a soul, and you have a body. That's the best way to consider it. I'm a spiritual being having a human existence. And that's who you really are. There's a story that I'm going to close with by Leonardo da Vinci when he was painting The Last Supper. He recruited an attractive, clean, innocent-looking young man named Pietro Vandolini to be his model for Jesus in the painting. It took several years to finish, and the final character he painted was Judas. It is told that Da Vinci went into the slums looking for someone who would look the part. He found the perfect man, one that was gaunt, empty, and hollow looking. Later, as he was painting this man, he sensed something vaguely familiar about the man, and he asked if they had ever met before. And the model said, "Yes, we have met. But I have come upon some hard times since then. My name is Pietro Vanvellini, and you painted me as Jesus some years ago." So he was Jesus for a while, and he relished that. But then he forgot. He used his human will to forget who he really was. And he went into hard times. So who you are is very important. You may have changed physically and drastically, but you are still the same. Of course, we should care for our bodies and respect them as the temples of the living God, as told in Scriptures. I respect my body, but I am not my body. I am more than this. I am more than this. I'm a spiritual being, willfully expressing through my body. And that's who you really are. You are more than this because God is more than this, and you are coming forth of God, this self-expression. That's who you are. Know that and believe that as the truth. So it is. So let it be done. God bless you. Have a wonderful holiday week.